writing a memoir. I'll be on that for about another year or so. I'm halfway finished. And I have a long chapter called On Becoming Greek.
Oh, you do, huh?
Yeah. Whereas I'm describing all my many trips to Greece and the rather phenomenal acceptance I've had in Greece. Greece has certainly read more of my books than a lot of countries 20 times Greece's size. So I realize that there's a special connection between me and Greece. I don't think too much about that. It's all very automatic. Maybe the main thing is that I love doing what I'm doing. And so naturally one wants to do what we love to do. I've always enjoyed writing. It's been a great pleasure of mine. And I wrote even as a child and adolescent. But and then I started to write professional articles that you have to do that if you're at an American university, if you want to stay there and be promoted. So I started doing that. And then after a while, I began to let my literary voice out too, which came as somewhat of a surprise to me, but I seem to have things to write and the ability to do that. So since then, I've been writing half my day. And right now, at my age, I'm in my 80s now, I write every morning. I've been writing this morning. That means 7 days a week usually. And then in the afternoons, I do other things. On the weekdays, I see patients in the afternoon. And so I'm simply doing what I like to do. It doesn't feel like a chore. If it were, I'm sure I'd stopped a long time ago. Well, maybe there's another answer to that, which is knowing that there's a great deal of pain in store for us. We have to enjoy life as we have it. Enjoy life as we have in old age. You know, I've just finished hearing an audible account of a book I read called Mama and the Meaning of Life. And there's a story in there called The Hungarian Cat Curse. And in that story, the therapist is trying to offer psychotherapy to a cat, a talking cat. It's a fantasy story. But one of the devices that he uses is the cat's very upset because it's coming. He's in his 9th life and he's coming to the end of his life, and the therapist is, and yet this cat doesn't do anything. He sits there and waits all the time. He's tormenting a certain person, but between months when he doesn't see that person, he simply waits, and the therapist is effective with him by saying, "You've only got this one life left, like we have only one life." And the cat is very amazed that we have only one life and he has 9, and he feels very sorry for us, and he feels a lot less hostility towards this man because he has only one life. But the therapist then talks to him about the fact that, but you're not living your life. You know, you don't do anything. You sit and you wait all the time, and there's a lesson to be learned in that, and the lesson is that the more unlived life we have in us as we approach the end of life, the more regrets we will have, the more unhappiness, the more fear. So I think we need to live and use up all of our life and not have a lot of unlived life inside of us. And that's certainly my goal, and I think that's true for me. I feel like I don't have a lot of unlived life. I'm doing all that I can. I love to write, and I'm doing that. I'm fortunate enough to be with the wife I've had since I was a young boy, and my children, so I count myself very fortunate. People who never accomplished what they wanted to do, not accomplished, never tried to do what they wanted.
Yes.
Those are the people I feel who perhaps will be most really frightened and panicked about dying. Oh yes. The childhood isn't all joy, as you know. There's lots of crying, there's lots of things, but there is that joy of innocence in childhood that we all love, and we get it when we play games. When my family goes on vacation, we do an awful lot of game playing, cards and chess and tennis and ping pong. We get all those pleasures as well. So yes, I think we're capturing that joy that we had in childhood would be quite a wonderful thing if we could get that. So I like to be in situations where I feel playful. I love playing chess, doing things like that. Yes, the innocence of childhood would be something quite wonderful to regain.
So you would advise us to keep some of this childhood feeling inside us?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, and indeed I would. And I try to do it in my own life as much as I can. I get a great pleasure out of bicycling, and I try to take a bicycle ride every day. Once Marilyn and I came to Greece, this was maybe our second trip to Greece, and we landed at Athens, and we took a tour bus the next day for 2 weeks tour of the Peloponnesus. And a strange thing happened to us that our luggage never arrived. And we had to take off on this 2 weeks of Peloponnesus with nothing. We stopped at a little store and bought an extra pair of socks or whatever it was, but we had no luggage whatsoever, except a couple of books that we were carrying. So we were rather 5 days. No, it's just signaling to me. 5 days trip, and so we set up for 5 days, and it ended up being quite a wonderful trip. Not to have any possessions, be like children, if you will. And by the end of the 5 days, we couldn't help smiling as we were watching all of our other guests carrying heavy suitcases and getting on the bus. And we didn't have anything. We just walked on free as a child. That was a wonderful 5 days for us. We taught us something, but it didn't teach us well enough because we continued to take heavy suitcases when we traveled elsewhere. Well, the idea of romantic love is quite a wonderful feeling. It sweeps over us, and all of us absolutely love that when it happens. However, in that form, a form in which we're so light as a feather, and in which I think almost always we idealize the other. We see the other in very unreal ways, in a way. We forget about everything else but that person. We worship that person in a way. That love never stays. It's an early phase of love, and it doesn't stay. It can metabolize into something that's more sustaining and more real. We're really seeing the other person, and we're empathizing with that person too. So it can transform into that other type of person. Some of us are fortunate enough to remain with that person that we once had great romantic love with, and then we developed a deeper, more mature love. I'm fortunate enough to have that because I met my wife when I was 15. There was a lot of romantic love there. And I see it still in many ways, but I see her now because, after all, I've spent every day of my life with her. I see her as a real person now. anyway, that's what I can say. I read Love's Executioner in a way saying that there's some really hampering things. There are things that get in the way of your living if you continue to see that person in this fantastic romantic way, because you're not seeing what that person really is. It doesn't. It can't stay very well. You go on to another and another and another kind of. I can't draw on my own personal experience to answer that because I've never had to face anything quite like that. My earlier life, when I was an adolescent, before that, it was very difficult because my parents were very poor and immigrants and had no money and worked very hard. But in my adult life, I haven't had to face that. But I feel like, you know, the interpersonal connection with other people, where you have empathy for the others, they for you, you share things with them, you're in a community. The worst thing of all would be in a situation like that where you behave in such a way that you're absolutely alone. Alone being you may have people around you, but nobody's really with you. So I would work very, very, very hard to maintain my ties and my connections and affiliations with all those people I care about. And that tragedy, which will happen to us, I think will be somewhat less powerful if you do that in a group. To be all alone, and I imagine the people who are emigrating alone into other countries, it's unimaginably terrible for them. Right, of course. Well, I would just have to work with that person and helping him look at what are the things that are truly important to him, how to help him grieve for these things that he's never going to have again, but turn towards what may be most important of all. What are the most important things to him? You know, and I think once again, he'll look at his connections with the people he loves and the people around him. And those are the things that are most important. Sometimes looking at a tragedy that happens, you know, causes us to take a look at the things that are really of greatest value to us. And I've cited a number of those things, even when people are faced with the fatal disease. They could, by what you're saying, they could slump into a terrible despair because after all, they're losing everything. But if there's a way to look at that, and maybe one of the ways is that theme I was just talking to you about, is how much unlived life is there in them, or how many. Putting it another way, I very often in therapy take a look at regrets that they might have. What are the regrets you have in your life, and is there a way for the next month or two? How can you live a regret-free life? See, months from now or two. You know, how many less regrets we have. And I work with that a whole lot. How do you live life without building new regrets? So I think that, to me, that's my pathway into working with that kind of thing. Well, it's been a never-ending a voyage of self-discovery. That working with others helps you work with yourself too. For the last 25 years, I've been in a therapy group, not as the leader, as just a leaderless therapy group with 10 other therapists. So that's 25 years. And we've been meeting 2 weeks for an hour and a half. And I continue to learn new things about myself, as do others as well. We've had the same people all these times. Some people have died. Some new people have been added. But for me, you know, I gain a great deal from that therapy. I think there's no end to personal change and personal growth and what you can learn about yourself. So for me, when I work with people, I learn a lot about myself, and I have the great pleasure of bringing happiness to other people. It happens. We're very fortunate that way. Every single day of the week, so for Sundays, I'll see a patient, and generally I can do something for that patient. It makes their life better. Well, one piece of advice is what I've just said to you about a group. I think one of the disadvantages of being a psychotherapist is a certain kind of isolation. You work with patients all day long, and you miss community. You work in other medical fields, or let's just say you're surrounded with nurses, students, and assistants, and other things. But the life of a psychotherapist can be very lonely. So I think it's really important that they have other colleagues that they talk with. And I think forming a leaderless group of people who meet from time to time. There are groups, other ways that you can do groups by being supervision groups. They present patients to one another, and that's very common. But I'm arguing for a support group, a health. Like we're in this group and we're talking about ourselves, and it's a leaderless support group. Confidential. You never talk about this to anyone else, but at least you can use your skills for working on your own issues and those of others. And the other thing is you never stop learning in this field. Most of the learning you do is postgraduate. Much of the learning you do is from supervision that you will get with senior therapists afterwards. Don't pay too much attention to this new cognitive behavioral trend. Not going to last. It's very superficial. It's a very bad way to do therapy. Right, evidence-based therapy. There is no evidence, frankly, for it. The evidence for it is extremely meager, and it's not deep, and it doesn't persist. I think the whole idea that cognitive behavioral therapy is evidence-based is an absolute fraud. You'll never find out. I can see patients that are improved a lot, but some of that change is going on at a level they don't share with me, or they can't share with me, but they don't know. Maybe it's simply from having confessed. Maybe it's simply from having been with someone who respects them, who's heard their darkest secrets and still respects them. And they can't put that into words, but sometimes their changes occur for reasons that we never know. Well, I think that, I don't ever use the term existential therapy. That was never my term. I know I wrote a book with that name, but I never meant it to be thought of as some school of therapy. What I meant was that all therapists should have a good awareness of the existential issues that may have plagued their patients. But you can't just look at those issues with people. People have interpersonal problems. People have unable to have vocational problems that are not really existential. So I think I want all therapists to be aware of existential issues. And those things will never go away because they're built into the existence of human beings. We'll always have to face death, and we'll always have to deal with issues like making choices and dealing with isolation because we were thrown into this world alone, to leave it alone. I think having a very good partner and a good support network, and I try to keep that very open. I belong to a lot of groups. I have another group. We just meet once a month for a couple hours. We present cases to one another. And I have another group. I'm a supervisor. I lead a group of students in discussing cases, but it's been the same students for 25 years. I know them very well. And that's another group. And I have another group that I belong to, which is a group of doctors who write. So we meet once a month also. So I think these kinds of groups are very important to me. And if a therapist can ever get into a therapy group for therapists, that would be the best thing of all.